Big FM Shillong Aizawl presents Aditya Veera in conversation with Robben Ford. Aditya Veera is a singer, artist manager, music journalist and podcaster. Mr. Robben Ford is one of the world's premier electric guitarists, particularly known for his blues playing as well as his ability to be comfortable in a variety of musical contexts. A 5-time Grammy nominee, Mr. Ford has played with artists as diverse as Joni Mitchell, Miles Davis, George Harrison, Bob Dylan, John Mayall, Greg Allman, John Scofield, Susan Tedeschi, Kep Moore, Mavis Staples, Brad Paisley, and many others. Aditya Veera in conversation with Robben Ford.
So, Mr. Ford, if I were to go back in time, turn the clock back, and I came to you and said, I want to learn music from you, what is it that you would be looking for in a potential musician who really hasn't had any kind of formal training or introduction to music? What are the qualities that you'd identify in a potential musician?
Well, I think if someone really is a potential musician, they'll learn quickly. And you can kind of tell that, that's if someone is able to pick up on, what you're saying, what you're showing them. Because I know what the opposite side of that is. I've said to people, put your first finger on the first string on the 3rd fret, and they still don't know what you're talking about with the guitar. So, generally, a potential musician kind of learns things quickly. They have a natural, inclination.
So when you sing certain songs, I'm a huge fan of your singing as well. The great quality of your singing is almost lovingly, and you do it with a lot of charis. You sort of feel the words when you sing it. How conscious a process is that? You've been through several great masters, I'm sure. Each person has different styles. And how have you developed your impeccable quality in terms of singing?
Well, thank you for that. I always sang, even in the early grade school, like early bands when I was 13, 14. I was always the singer. But I think the main thing that I have always been able to do is be in tune. And so, that's a good start. I never had a lot of voice. And I've actually, studied with a few different people, which I think was certainly necessary for me. I don't think Aretha Franklin ever took a vocal lesson, but I needed it.
True.
And so because of my limitations, I would say, I had to be very sincere. I had to really be honest and really just present myself with what I have, here I am, this is how I do it. So, it requires a certain amount of bravery, to, be at all times willing to expose your limitations.
Right.
And so over time, I really came to know my voice. I came to know my limitations, so you start putting things in the right key. This is very important, Right. Keys are very important for singers to present songs. So it really was a very slow process for me. And I'm still working on it, really. Certain things I'm more suited to sing than others. And so I shouldn't sing those things that I'm not suited to sing, So it's just a refining process, And a lot of it, I would say, both for myself as a vocalist, but even as a guitar player, it's, really kind of finding the things that you do best, focusing on them, and then trying to, work within your limitations, actually. That's not a bad piece of advice.
You have been a musician who has worked your way through, achieved a lot of milestones, right? How important are honors and recognitions or good reviews, write-ups in the press? I'm sure the pure musician in you would definitely need some kind of gratification to the job that you're really doing well. All these must come useful in some or the other way. So what is your take on this?
You know, no one likes to get bad reviews, of course.
Right.
I have a tendency to avoid reviews. Like I really don't read them because, you know, I don't want to know. And people showing up to your concerts, that's what really matters, you know?
True that.
And if there are people showing up and they're happy and enjoying it, you know, that makes it all worthwhile. And yeah, it is important to get positive feedback for sure.
Right.
But I think I've always been, I think I'm easily hurt, actually, by negative comments. And so I just kind of avoid the whole thing.
Right.
So that I don't have to go through that emotional upheaval. But these days, you know, it's been quite gratifying because with things like Instagram, you know, where you're able to communicate directly with your audience, it's you're not being reviewed by some dude or some, you know, woman who maybe didn't like it. You know, who cares? You know, this one person, and they're influential. So I was like, I'll just pass on that, and I'll see how, you know, people respond when they come to my show.
Talking about the whole recording process, what is generally more satisfying to you? Is it working on a nice recording that can be crafted and probably good to listen to, something that's frozen in time, or would it be a live performance like you mentioned earlier?
Well, everything has its place. There's nothing like playing. It can't be, you know, there's just nothing like actually playing with good musicians in front of people. That feeling, you know, it isn't the experience in the studio. I love working in the studio, but, you know, it's sort of, it's a little painstaking, you know. I mean, you have to redo things, you have to really work on things. It's a lot more work than the live performances. And the live performance just puts everything together, you know. That's it, you know, that's kind of why we do this, you know, to a great extent. I mean, I'm not a hobbyist. It's, of course, you know, as you know, it's really kind of my life, you know. So when you're in front of people and playing with other musicians, that certainly has the most potential for satisfaction, you know, on a personal level. But I will say this, you know, as well. Music for me, it's like I'm just as happy sitting and listening to great music live as I am playing it. And I'm also just as happy being in the producer's chair on the other side of the glass rather than being one of the musicians out there. It's very holistic, you know. It is all an expression of making music, producing music in the moment, you know, or listening to it in the moment. It's like, great. My favorite thing to do has always been to sit in a club with friends, watching my favorite artists perform. Like I'd just as soon do that as play, you know, for sure. It's just as enriching and fulfilling, you know.
When one says internalize the music or make it part of your system, sort of imbibe it, what do you really mean by that? Like, I've been trying to get an insight to the distinction between the physical practice of learning a certain note, or say you're trying to train yourself in terms of learning a couple of guitar scales. There's, of course, this internalization which precedes expression. How does one work on this internalization process?
I would say that it comes from, you know, loving it. Also taking every little aspect, you know, like if you learn a chord, that chord isn't just like a building block. It's not a chunk of all of the things that you have to learn.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing right there in itself, and you just love playing that chord.
True.
Or scales, like people think that they learn a scale so that they can play music, but actually a scale is music.
Right.
And just like playing that scale should be just as cool as playing anything else, and it should feel that way to you. Like everything it's all musical. Like you're instantly, it's music right now. It's not music later after you learn these things. So every one of these aspects, little things in music, chords, scales, learning a melody, all of those things, that's it.
Okay.
Every single aspect of it is music, right now.
We'll be right back with Aditya Veera in conversation with Robben Ford. Stay tuned to 98.3 Big FM Shillong. Big FM Shillong Aizawl presents Aditya Veera in conversation with Robben Ford.
You did mention about playing in front of audiences and getting a lot of joy doing so, right? So is there some sort of fear in the process of unfolding the present, particularly before an audience? When things go wrong, say if you're sort of like planning it out, if you were to like forget your next move, in what way do you carry the memory of instructions to go to the next particular move? Because it's so structured. How do you sort of do that? How do you sort of have that in your memory as to what needs to be done next in front of when you're playing in front of a huge audience?
I can tell you this, like I keep my music simple, for one thing.
Okay.
And I have a pretty good memory, so there are those fundamental things, like I know what we're playing, I know how it goes, I'm not going to forget. Again, partially because I think I keep the music simple. Why would I make it so difficult that I didn't enjoy myself or feel comfortable? But then there's the special sauce, for me, is actually being willing to make a mistake,
Right.
Like that's included. And it's one of the beautiful things, that exists in, most, kind of like I consider, I'm largely a blues player. It's kind of a folk music, and it actually incorporates mistakes. Mistakes are actually a part of it. When mistakes are made, you almost enjoy it. It's funny. There's humor in that. And I think the audience likes it. Like when you include that kind of thing, when it's all included, you can make mistakes, things can kind of go wrong. You're emotionally prepared for that as a part of the whole thing,
Sure.
So that's how I've always worked with it. It's like you just move on, and I think audiences like it. I'll tell you a little story, and it's true. It's actually a true story.
Okay.
Otis Redding, when he played at Monterey Pop Festival, so that was 1968, I think.
Okay.
And Otis was just sort of starting to get pretty well known and having some success. And he was backstage before the concert, and he was smoking a joint. And his manager came up to him and he's like, Otis, man, this is Monterey Pop. This could be really great. We really want to make this, special,
Right.
And Otis Redding said, oh man, it ain't nothing but a barn dance. So people are just people. They're not this super critical force in front of you expecting perfection. So you
Sure.
can kind of relax and share all of that with the audience, and I think they dig it.
Speaking of performance, at what point does the performance begin for you? Is it from the very first note that you play? How do you sort of exclude all of the external intrusions, perhaps?
I try to be alone,
Okay.
for about a half an hour before the show. I always warm up my voice. So, that kind of requires me being by myself. So I always hope to be able to do that, spend time, just warming up my voice. Play the guitar a little bit, but not too much. But I do like having space, some space, before a show. Because, you want to relax your nerves, kind of settle in. Okay, we walk out there and you feel, relaxed and prepared for the moment.
So when you're preparing for a concert, for this feeling to be communicated, how important is your own state of mind? You being a performer, having a performance at, say, 4 in the noon, and you're affected by something very unpleasant, right? Say at 3 o'clock, like right before your performance. Would you be able to still deliver a virtuoso performance? Are you able to sort of keep the performance separate from the individual? Like, how difficult is it for you to separate that?
I'm told that I do a good job of it. I mean, if you're upset, you're upset, and you have to work with that. People tell me that I do a pretty good job.
Okay.
I only know from their side telling me, because I can be really, things do happen that are quite upsetting sometimes, especially, you can do an entire performance where you're dealing with a terrible sound system or a terrible amplifier, and you have to play in front of people. That is awful. And so I'm told that I do a good job of it. That's really all I can say, because I can be upset through an entire performance,
Right.
But you got to do your job. People showed up to see a play. You got to do your job. Got to be a professional.
You also have had very rich musical heritage, right? You have a lot of them in your family have been involved in music from a very young age. How important is it to have music in your blood? Can it be taught and learned if it's not in your blood?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, as they say. And I don't think anyone really knows that a real answer to that exactly. But I personally feel that anyone can do anything.
Okay.
And but if you're starting at the beginning, you're starting at the beginning, and it might take a long time. And from my point of view, it might take lifetimes. You got to start somewhere, so you might as well start now.
Right.
And I really do believe that anyone can do anything. I do. I believe that. It's just that if you look at B.B. King and you look at John McLaughlin,
Sure.
wow. John McLaughlin can play super rings around, B.B. King, but B.B. King is delivering something that the rest of us can't touch. It's simple and it's beautiful. So that's how I mean that. It's like, when you really get down to it, everything is an expression of some kind of deep feeling, desire, love, creativity. Nobody owns those things, man.
Beyond musical performance itself, it sort of gets modified as we evolve, right? Like through several centuries, we have a lot of changes in terms of the technology, the lighting, the stage. But it's more of the cultural environment. When I say the cultural environment, of course, I mean tastes in terms of the audience, right? They also tend to change, right? So even when it comes to musicians, there's a great deal of PR relations, musical promotions. There's also great pressure involved for a musician to deliver, and also a lot of things to worry about, like sponsorship, and someone who'd probably want to sign them. So there are a wide range of issues that demand a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But that being said, if one's good work is to be noticed, do you resent that?
I was very fortunate. I had some really, big breaks at a very early age. I mean, that was a surprise to me to find myself, in a situation that was very high, at a very early age. Then everything went down.
Okay.
And I was struggling, having had really great success at an early age. And then things started going up again, So it's been like that my whole career, It's been up and down, up and down, up and down. And of course, you want everything to go smoothly. And it does for some people,
Right.
At least in terms of, having early success that continues throughout their whole life, like the Rolling Stones or something like that. No problem, man, since they were kids. So, it's one's karma, all of these things, and you can't resent it. And personally, all of these things can be worked with. Some people are better at it than others, and sometimes it takes you a long time to really figure out what's necessary to navigate a career, because you're an artist and you expect everyone to just come to you, and give you lots of money and say you're great. It just doesn't work like that. Or it does, Again, it has worked like that for some people, but a musician, needs to be strong, and you need to be smart.
True.
And it's always nice to have some help, along the way. Find people who you trust and like, who can help you. All of these things, they seem to be it's all, it takes a long time to learn for some of us. It did for me, how to navigate,
Right.
a professional career. And sure, I resent a lot of things, but it doesn't help, so you need to, just kind of man up, or woman up and do what's necessary. You got to do what you got to do. I can say one thing, though, that I do believe is true, is that if you serve the art, everything will be okay.
True.
Whatever the art is. If you just serve the art and kind of be open. Some people get very successful, some people get just a little, some people in the middle. It's just life,
We'll be right back with Aditya Veera in conversation with Robben Ford. Stay tuned to 98.3 Big FM Shillong. Big FM Shillong Aizawl presents Aditya Veera in conversation with Robben Ford.
Talking about success, when did you sort of feel the eureka moment in you that I feel a sense of accomplishment doing so?
As I say, it's been up and down, I thought I was going to be rich and famous forever when I was 21, 22. It just seemed like, of course, that will happen, And great things happened, and then it went down, and, you can doubt yourself. As a player, I always felt pretty good about my ability, personally. My ability, but it doesn't necessarily translate into, a career if you don't have a firm direction, like that's the trusting the art thing, So I think by my 30s, when I got into my 30s, and especially into my 40s, I felt like I'm going to be okay. You know, whatever happens, I'm going to be able to record, play in front of people. You know, it'll be all right. But just, you know, it doesn't mean you don't go through other hard times. You know, where you're not working, you're not making money, you're not quite sure. I've gone through a lot of that. You know, once again, I think the important thing is to keep your eye on the music.
Music is so much of an expression of one's personality, and it could be one's soul, it could be the kind of person you are. It's a very, very, very simple question, but does it require to be a good human being to make good music?
Apparently not. But at the same time, maybe so. You know, I think everybody's basically a good person. You know, they just have problems. You know what I mean? But it's really interesting. Like Miles Davis. Wow. I mean, man, that's a complicated situation there. Made incredible music, you know. Became super famous, super influential. He's probably the most revered artist in jazz, you know. Incredible. But, you know, I mean, he was a good person sometimes, maybe not such a good person sometimes. I don't know. It's complicated, you know. Yeah. That's a tough one.
Some of my favorite tracks are from your album Supernatural. If I remember well, there's Don't Lose Your Faith in Me.
Yeah.
So this is lovely string arrangement in them.
Yeah.
So for the fans of India and for the people from the rest of the world, would we be able to see you perform with a Philharmonic Orchestra any time in the near future?
Probably not. I'm actually speaking with a good friend of mine. He's a very well-known composer, film scorer. He does work with symphonies. He's French.
Oh, wow.
And he approached me about maybe doing something like that in France. I believe that I'm moving to France this year. I'm looking forward to it. But this would be the only situation where, for the first time, really, that I've been invited, you know, to do something like this. I've worked with big bands, you know, but a Philharmonic Orchestra, I haven't done that. So this is the first offer that I've had of this type, and it might happen, you know, it could.
So there's another question from the fans. Would they be able to see a reunion tour of the Robben 4 and the Blue Line again?
Well, you never know for sure, but you know, I would have said no. But I don't know if you're aware of this record that's being released. A British record company called Repertoire Records is releasing live recording. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, it's the Blue Line live in 1996.
Oh.
And these tapes from a 5-night stint at a club called Yoshi's in Oakland, California. We recorded 2 shows a night. And so there were 10 shows, and my co-producer of my last record, Pure, and the previous one, Purple House, we went through all of them, chose the best performances, and mixed it. And it's actually being released the end of this month. It's Robben Ford and the Blue Line live at Yoshi's. Yoshi's, yeah. And Repertoire Records, that's the record company. So keep an eye out for that. And
Sure thing.
I have a feeling that people are really going to be excited about it. I am.
Already
and
excited.
the band just sounds fantastic, you know. So it's really good.
Sure. Could you give us, or could you share some anecdotes from your touring experiences, something noteworthy that you'd like to share with our viewers here?
Wow. It's been a long career, man,
No, but a few interesting experiences that are worth sharing out here.
The first thing that came into my mind was I did a tour of Europe with a band that was called Miles Smiles. And this band was a group of musicians, all of whom had worked with Miles Davis. And we played the music of Miles Davis. And it's actually, you can find it on YouTube. There's a couple of shows that are up. The band was Omar Hakim on drums, Daryl Jones on bass, Joey DiFrancesco on organ, Wallace Roney on trumpet, Rick Margitza on tenor saxophone, and myself on guitar. And I just have to say that for me, I think that was the most really thoroughly enjoyable group and kind of music maybe that I've ever done, because it was Miles Davis's music, and Miles is my probably greatest musical inspiration and influence, and all of those guys have had the same experience of working with him, So, and all of us loved Miles's music and knew the vibe, so we were able to create it, I dare say. And because we all knew what it felt like to play with him. So I felt that we actually brought it, like even without him being there, the spirit was there.
Sure.
And I felt like we actually really recreated the whole experience of what it was like to see him. And I get, kind of welled up even thinking about it. It was beautiful. And there's one particular concert that is available. There's two or three, but there's one in particular, and it's the North Sea Jazz Festival. Yeah, that was a great experience for me. Working with that band. Of course, when I was invited to join Joni Mitchell, I was 22 years old. For the first time, I was playing with musicians who were all very evolved, great players, So that was a big jump, from playing with my brothers and my buddies, in empty clubs, to suddenly, I'm playing with great musicians, who became, very good friends and really helped me learn on their time. That is the best thing that a musician can experience, is to, be around musicians who are way more evolved than they are. And that's where you really learn,
Sure.
is playing with people who are way more evolved than you are. And it's kind of a rare, it doesn't happen to everyone necessarily,
Right.
So, I can't say enough about that experience, to finally be able to, I was 22, I was a kid. And here I am playing with people who have worked with Oliver Nelson and Sonny Rollins and, Thelonious Monk and Frank Zappa and, all these people. Just incredible. So those two things are kind of the most outstanding experiences, I would say.
We'll be right back with Aditya Veera in conversation with Robben Ford. Stay tuned to 98.3 Big FM Shillong. Big FM Shillong Aizawl presents Aditya Veera in conversation with Robben Ford.
So what remains for you now? You've achieved technical excellence to sort of surrender to the bubble of sound and encase yourself in it. You yourself are very accomplished, as you mentioned. You work with some of the finest musicians in the world. What remains for you now?
It seems to be true that everything goes in circles or cycles, like full circle. You kind of come back to where you started. And my musical interests have come right back to where I started. Not the blues per se, but blues is where I cut my teeth. That's where I learned how to play the guitar, was playing blues music. I wanted to better myself and become a better musician, to learn more. It was jazz. I used to listen to a lot of the Blue Note records. Wayne Shorter is a big hero of mine. But I listened to a ton of Blue Note records. You know what I'm talking about, right?
That's
the jazz.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So the 60s is sort of what my musical period, where I really formed my own musical kind of loves, which grew over time. But that's really where I come from. And so over the last couple of years, my last record called Pure is an instrumental album. And prior to making Pure, I was producing instrumental records. So I've been writing in an instrumental way and playing, and the guitar, like more about the guitar than about songwriting and singing. And so this is what I'm doing right now. I'm actually working on music that's similar, to that kind of Blue Note period.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to record it. I'm hoping to get together a group of musicians like Omar Hakim, Kenny Garrett, Robbie Coltrane, James Genus, like the great jazz players today, who also can play kind of anything. They can play funk, they can play rock if you want it. So versatile musicians who share this same love of that period of music and can really play it. I'd like to do something with that. That's what's on the front burner for me right now, and we'll see where it goes. But it's really about guitar playing and composing, writing instrumental music.
There's definitely something very mystical about music. Does it sort of create a proclivity of interest in a few other aspects, part of the mystical for you?
Oh, very. Yeah.
Could you throw some light on that?
Well, it's kind of impossible. Music is kind of impossible. And I know that when I'm playing, there are times when I'm just like, I don't know how this is happening. I really don't. How could this possibly be happening? I don't know where it comes from. You train, like you would train in anything. Like you would train in martial arts or yoga or meditation. You train. You just apply yourself. And then somehow it seems like this thing is going on that, is absolutely, impossible. It's impossible, It all comes out of training. But then it becomes mystical, and you're like, you really don't know how that happens, how you're doing this. It's really true. And I mean, musicians, and I'm not one of them, but, I must say, I'm a big fan of Indian music. My girlfriend and I listen to it a lot. For me, like Indian music, that's where you really hear the impossible. What I hear in Indian music, I just can't fathom it.
So now we will sort of move on to like a very interesting segment of today. It's called the rapid fire segment, all right? So I'm gonna shoot across 5 questions, and you gotta answer them real quick. Okay?
Okay.
What is your favorite guilty pleasure song?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
That's a huge name. What is your idea of an all-star blues band, and who would be there in the band, in the all-star blues band?
Well, I would say B.B. King's band from the mid-'60s. Sonny Freeman was the drummer. Duke Jethro was on organ. And, there was no bass guitar. It was the organ. like organ, trio, and he had two horn players. I remember Kenneth Sands was on the saxophone. I don't remember the trumpet player's name.
Okay.
But I like that. I saw that band live. In the mid '60s, and it's like top 5 concerts of my life. So these guys are on. No one knows who they are.
What is that one song that always makes you cry?
There's a song by a Latin singer. I think he's from Brazil. The song is his name is Caetano Veloso.
Okay.
And the song is called Lamento Borincano.
All right.
And wow, that is a beautiful thing.
What was your favorite sport while growing up?
Baseball.
One last one. What would you be if you could be other things apart from being a musician?
I'm also very interested in Qigong and Tai Chi. I study.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And, quite honestly, this is where my mind is, basically peace, harmony. I'm looking for these things,
Lovely. Mr. Ford, down in the distant horizon, how would you want to be remembered as?
A nice guy.
Now, I would like to take some questions. A lot of them have been asking a couple of interesting questions. Mr. Nurani says something about your record with Joe Dirio was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very long time ago, and I remember the session. I remember that I wrote one thing for the record, and Joe was an amazing player.
Someone else says, do you still own the Fender Esprit? If not, what happened to it?
Well, the original one, the first one that I played for about 9 years, I sold that guitar.
Okay.
And because I wanted to buy a Les Paul, and I wanted to start playing Les Pauls, the guitar was very bright. It was, I think, maple, and it had a spruce top and an ebony fretboard. It was very bright. And I started wanting to hear a darker sound. And and I also really like vintage guitars. And so indeed, I was able to sell that and buy, something that I might not otherwise be able to buy, because vintage guitars are very expensive,
Shebal Zaveri from India says, please release live footage with Jing Chi.
There's no live footage of Jing Chi. Thank you for that. I mean, I'm a big fan of that band. That's something that I really enjoyed. I'm really proud of those records. Some really good writing, some great music on those records.
This interview is also going to be aired on Big FM Shillong and Big FM Aizawl. So would you have like a closing note for the people who are going to be listening to this interview on radio?
Well, it's a privilege to be able to address, so many people. And I really appreciate being here with you. I hope people will certainly check out the music if they haven't heard it before, especially on my most recent record, Pure. If people really like a particular artist or musician, please buy their music and don't just stream it, because artists don't get paid anymore for music, and they have to spend money to make it. So I hope you don't mind my adding that to this moment, Wow, it's always wonderful to be able to share, with others.
Sure. Well, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in and having given me this privilege of interviewing you. Please do stay in touch. We'd love to have you in India. I'd love to host you in India as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed Aditya Veera's conversation with Mr. Robben Ford. For more interviews with top-class international musicians, tune in to 98.3 Big FM Shillong, and you can also follow Aditya Veera's Instagram page @adix70. That is ADIX70. This is 98.3 Big FM Shillong.